there's a link between sexual radicalism and political radicalism. And Wilhelm Reich, whose ideas were involved with the Frankfurt School, he saw, as he put it, that the sexual process of society has always been the core of its cultural process. And what you've outlined there in terms of the wives of the Decembrists, I think, is a good example of that. But where did these ideas stem from?
Well, these were all imports from abroad. Great Britain, then and now, was the locus, London was the locus of anti-Russian revolutionary thinking. The only time that didn't happen was during the Soviet era, but that no longer existed, certainly after World War II. But when serfdom was abolished, the state then compensated landowners for losing this labor, which means that you had a large mass of cash, earned by others, of course, poured into these families. And of course, was taken from the sphere of actual production and directed to their own consumption. This was their new liberation, their new freedom. And now they briefly had the money to do it. Now, the lands of the few nobles owning serfs had to be compensated. They were paid off. And with this money, they simply sank into lethargy. And the peasants ended up buying much of Russia, making it one of the most egalitarian societies in the world. And in literature, Dostoevsky's A Raw Youth, middle of the 1870s, one of my favorites. Not many people read this. And he talks about a new generation of Russians aspiring to be Rothschilds. That was the term. And no major writer at the time believed any differently. The main character was Arkady Bulgorky, the symbol of the era. He's illegitimate, which is not uncommon, son of a landowner who was totally dissolute in his life. He was raised by strangers. He had no real home. So he becomes a nihilist, and with nihilism, only power is real. The nihilistic movement was scientific, but it only recognized blind cause and effect. It was materialist modern science. Since wealth was only the best means to power, Arkady ends up being like a Rothschild as his main goal. So that's a very powerful expression as to what was happening after the Decembrist Revolution, how these people were thinking, and where this all came from. People like Posada, so many others, Chernyshevsky, all received their marching orders from a British ideology. Even Alexander Herzen, this whole, he ended up in exile in London. This usually comes from British salons, and to a lesser extent from Paris, and made its way into Russia as these noble families were sitting on wealth without much to do, and it created a sense of excitement. It created a sense of rebellion. And now they had the freedom to do as they pleased, and it didn't take long for them to simply indulge in every passion they could. And this is what destroyed the social structure of Russia that led to the ability of really the white forces not to be able to rally the tradition like they should have, and collapsed into the Bolshevik movement.